We're back with another installment. This would be number five, fifth video of the series. I might make about 10 videos. We'll see if I run out of stuff. I'm not going to do this forever, but I figured 10 videos should be enough, maybe more. We'll see what happens. Um, I want to thank everybody for their wonderful comments and views and appreciation for what it is I'm doing, whatever this is. And it's bringing back a lot of memories for a lot of people, which is really cool. Which is the whole idea of this. Um, and today I want to talk about some of the staff people. I mentioned Mr. Perkins last time. I want to mention some of the staff people that I've had the pleasure of working with, um, and some of the students, of course. And I'm going to start off with one young lady. I'm going to start right away because I have a tendency to run on a little bit. I think you know that. But this one young lady appeared soon after I started at the school in 1983, somewhere in the 83, 84 ish, 85 ish era. And she came in with a group of her friends in grade 9. And this one, the minute she walked into the music office and noticed something really, really, really cool about her, and she had a stutter, a really significant stutter. Um, anyway, we had a talent show booked in November or whatever of that year, and they auditioned to get into it. And the first thing I did was put them on stage, because if you've got someone who might have a bit of a stutter, chances are they can sing, and they can sing really, really well. Um, and so they went on stage and they sang, and they were fabulous. And this young lady also played flute, as I recall, and she was a really, really good singer. And um, some point in time, she mentioned to me, that she wanted to be a music teacher too. And I thought, well, that's kind of really cool, or be a teacher. And I went, that's really, really cool. So, and she ultimately did. She went to school and graduated, and she was valedictorian of her graduating class with the stutter. And she did a wonderful job. And she, in fact, sang during her valedictorian speech, which no one had ever done before. And she was just marvelous. She went on to become a phenomenal teacher, a great historian of black history in her anti-Mish persona, and she became the CBC Poet Laureate for 2 years. And her poetry and her voice reading are exceptional, exceptional. And I just spoke with her a couple days ago, and her name is Michelle Muir, for those of you who went to school with her, and you know how remarkable she is. And she's a wonderful, wonderful person. But she was, I met her as a little 14-year-old with a stutter, and she still has that little bit of a stutter. But she's accomplished wonderful things, and wonderful, wonderful teacher, tremendous poet, great with words, great in front of a microphone, or even not in front of a microphone. And she's one of the people that I've taught that I'm very, very proud of. And it kind of mirrored my background. Some of you know the story of how I started piano at the age of 4. And by the time I got to high school, um, I've been playing for 10 years. I accomplished everything I was going to accomplish with these uh, Viennese sausage little fingers of mine. I was told that I would never be a concert pianist because my arms are too short, my fingers are too small. And they were absolutely right. I mean, Rachmaninoff had massive fingers. So I go to the band class in grade 9 at my high school, and my teacher, whose name was David Clothier, who inspired me to become a teacher, he said to me, he was reading down the class list, and he said, "Okay, what's your name? What do you play? How long have you been playing it?" When he got to my name, he went, "What's your name, Kaplan? Um, how long have you been playing your machine?" I said, 10 years. "What do you play?" I said, "Piano." "What else do you play?" "Piano." He went, "Go on percussion." I'm going, "What's percussion?" He goes, "You idiot. Drums over there in the corner with the other yonkels." And I went, "I don't know how to play drums." He says, "Neither do they. Just go over there, just sit down." He later told me that because of my background in piano, being able to read treble and bass clef and be able to understand timing, that the best spot for me would probably be on timpani, which is what it was. And a year later, in grade 10, I auditioned for and got into the Toronto Youth Symphony Orchestra as the principal timpanist, just having only played for a year, and I beat out about 6 other people who had lots more years' experience. So in grade 10, grade 11, I remember saying to Mr. Clothier, um, I want to become a high school music teacher. And again, he responded with, "You're an idiot. It's too much pressure. Don't do it. You won't like it. You'll burn out." I said, "No, no, no, I really do." And he went, "Okay, here's an oboe. Here's a book. Here's a reed. Take it home. Learn it. Come back." And the next week was, "Here's a clarinet. Here's a book. Here's a reed. Go home. Learn it." And I did. I learned everything in the music room. But he inspired me to become a music teacher and to become a teacher. And a lot of what I did and a lot of the way I act, I realized many years later, was the way he acted and the way he approached things. And he had a wonderful sense of humor. He was an older British gentleman who played oboe with the London Philharmonic at one point, and he was obvious that he had a lot of fun teaching. And I said, "Gee, he's having a lot of fun. I want to do that for a living." Um, and I did. And so when Michelle came up to me and said, "I want to be a teacher," I went, "That's so cool because that's the cycle. That's the cycle." And she did. And she put her heart and soul into teaching. And I'm very, 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 very proud of her. Couldn't be more proud. So, Michelle, if you're watching, this is definitely for you, and it's definitely well earned. Um, Another person I want to talk about is another gentleman who some of you may have had for drama or English, and his name is Mr. Tepper. Now, Mr. Tepper was, I would say, 99.9% deaf when I met him. Um, there's two different there's two different hearing impaired or deaf. I shouldn't say that. Hearing impaired um, groups. Those who have been deaf from birth, and those who go deaf later on in their lives. Mr. Tepper was the latter. Um, there's profoundly deaf and hearing impaired. And I have friends in both categories. I coached with a gentleman who is profoundly deaf. In fact, his wife, and both his daughters are profoundly deaf, but they're wonderful, phenomenal people, and good athletes. And one of them, I believe his daughter is a doctor today. Um, and so I had mentioned the two groups to both of these people, and the profoundly deaf group doesn't have anything to do with the hearing impaired group, and the hearing impaired group doesn't have anything to do with the profoundly deaf group. It's kind of interesting, like it's a one-upmanship. But Mr. Tepper could read lips. He spoke normally, and if you didn't know he had a hearing issue, um, unless someone told you, he would just assume that he could hear everything that was going on. And there was one little incident. We were doing a play, and I just I can't remember it. It was an Agatha Christie play. I can hear some of you shouting it out now, but I can't hear. I don't remember it. But it had to do with the detective, the Mousetrap. The Mousetrap, was that it? Might have been. Okay, maybe we'll call it the Mousetrap. And the the actors in the play were very, very good. And we were at the stage across the street from the school, and um, we would have rehearsals in the drama room, and Tepper would be doing his directing thing. But the one thing he couldn't do as a director was to hear the fine nuances of the human voice. Um, and that's where I kind of came in, and I sort of snuck in a few details behind his back, literally behind his back, to adjust the way the actors would voice their lines, because some of them were just they were just coming out flat as anything. Um, and one actor was just in his lines during one of the few last rehearsals. He was just coming out with no emotion. Well, that's because Tepper wasn't able to listen to how he was saying it. So I basically told him, listen, here's how you do it. You got some projection in your voice, blah 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 blah, and he did. Of course, it really did work. He really worked on it, and it turned out to be really, really, really well done. Um, but that's something. This is where I could help out, and something that Tepper probably couldn't. And he was a very good English teacher, and a really, really good director. He really was like a great actor. Oh my God, a phenomenal actor. They did a teacher's version of um, White Christmas, or something like that. And his group came out, and he was full on punk. And I'm standing in the calf, as I usually do, in the back of the calf, watching the stuff on stage. And I'll be dreaming of this Christmas. I'll be dreaming of that Christmas. And his group of three, four people came out. We'll be dreaming of a black Christmas, and they were really, really into it. And Tepper was holding a mic, and at the end of it, he slammed that mic into the stage. Well, the stage crew knew what was going to happen. I didn't, and my head exploded. I mean, these microphones, I babied these microphones like you have no idea, and they knew. And it turns out they gave him a dummy mic that didn't work to begin with. And when he slammed it down, he loosened things up a little bit so that it burst apart when it hit the stage. They knew I would be absolutely livid, and it was a trick that they were playing on me. And he was really into it. He didn't hold back. So as an actor, he was an actor, and he was really good actor. Um, but he was a very, again, a teacher with a special touch with students, and it's a challenge to have any kind of your senses impaired, whether it's sight, hearing, speech, um, and still be up in front of a class and deliver the message and be able to interact with the kids. And he put on one good play after another good play after another good play. And so that was one story. But in the same play, the two lead male actors at the end of scene one are in a Victorian drawing room, and they're busy eating these uh, cucumber sandwiches or something. And they were crackers with something on them, and they were having a bit of an argument. And after the final through final rehearsal, they were just eating and arguing and sort of speaking. And I came up to them afterwards, and I think Bill was there that day, and I said to them, "You're arguing. You have food. Stuff the food in your mouth, and start arguing with food in your mouth so that it goes everywhere." And they went, "Oh, okay." And so the first show, that's exactly what they did. They had this wonderful little argument on stage, in front of the stage, right? And they're shoving these sandwiches in their mouths, and they're arguing with food in their mouths and spitting everywhere. And Tepper went nuts, just furious after them. And yet the crowd went nuts. They loved every minute of it. The scene was a hit. And he came up to me afterwards. He says, "What did you tell them?" And I said, "I just told them to argue with their food in their mouths like people would do if they're having an argument at the dinner table." And it worked. And he grumbled off and walked away. But it was really, really good. A great scene. In fact, one scene, there's a Miss Molly something, and there's a scene where she's looking upstage at the curtain at the back, and somebody peeks in the window at the back of the stage, and she screams in fright. And the person playing the detective is supposed to say something civil like, "What is it, Miss Molly? Whatever." And in the final play, he looked at her and he says, so, something like, something, "Miss Molly, hello, Miss Molly," or some phrase from that famous song by "Good golly, Miss Molly." That was the line. "Good golly, Miss Molly." And the crowd went nuts again. This is purely on improv, purely on instinct. And it was such a hit. And again, Tepper. Why did he do that? It worked. The audience reaction. He couldn't hear the audience reaction. See? I said the audience went nuts. And it reminded me a lot of the Beethoven story when Beethoven did his final big work, which was the Ninth Symphony. Um, and he sat either in front of the stage or on the stage in a chair because he could barely move. He was sick. And somebody else conducted. And when it was all over, by the way, if you haven't seen Beethoven's Ninth, watch it. It's amazing. There's all kinds of videos on YouTube. But you can imagine Beethoven, totally deaf, looking at this, just watching the musicians play, because he could hear what they're doing based on what they were doing. And at the end of it, he just sat there nodding. And one of the vocalists came over, stood him up, turned him around to see the audience, who were on their feet, stomping because they knew he couldn't hear the applause, and waving white handkerchiefs so he could see how impressed they were. And this was the same issue with Tepper, is that he couldn't hear the audience reaction. He didn't realize that those scenes were successful. He just saw them and said, "That's not how you were supposed to do it." But he was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful teacher. And what a guy. Terrific guy. Another drama teacher that I had the pleasure of working with, unfortunately, is no longer with us. Terry Slater. In the year, in 2000 or 2001, when Westwood and Morningstar merged, it was a year of sheer chaos. Just chaos. The school hadn't been finished on time. There was construction people all over the place. Um, and I had to work with a new drama teacher. And Mr. Slater was a, uh, an island of calm in that whole world of chaos. He really was. Um, One of the most respected, um, talented, and effective people at communicating. And he was blatantly honest all the time and very, very supportive. And I know his students, um, they easily would have run through a wall for him. They really would have. He was that wonderful. Um, Unfortunately, he got ill and he passed away several years ago, way too early, way too young. And for those of you who worked with Mr. Slater, um, I once asked him. I said, "Slater, that's where are you from?" He says, "Well, my name's not actually Slater. It's," and he named some large Ukrainian name about that long. And when family came to Canada, they shortened it to Slater, as they would any name. The but his name, Slater's name wasn't Slater, and he was very proud. Ukrainian accent, Ukrainian background, sorry, and he's very proud of it. And I miss him. I miss him a great deal because this is a gentleman who had so much talent and so much empathy for the students. Um, and you wish you could take and bottle some of that and give it to teachers. And the same thing with Michelle Muir. That empathy, that interaction with the students, that ability to communicate, and you wish you could bottle it and spread it around a little bit. Um, Somebody reminded me of the strike back in '97. For those of you who weren't born yet, back in 1997, there was a conservative um, uh, government in power in Ontario, led by Mike Harris. And there was an argument online not a couple days ago that, teachers should be happy getting the summers off, blah, 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 not realizing that teachers get paid 10 months' salary spread over a 12-year period. That's how they work. It's a 10-month salary spread over a 12-year period. It's not a 12-month salary. And back in when I started teaching, we were paid for 10 months, and you weren't paid for the summer. And you wanted to teach summer school, you could teach summer school. If it were up to me, I would have taught 12 months of the year. I wouldn't have taken necessarily the summer off. I would have taken breaks during the year off. And that's just how I would have preferred it. But people say, oh, you guys get the summer off. Well, that's just how the business works. We don't have any say in that. It's not in a contract where you negotiate 2 months off. You're out of work for 2 months, basically. And you can't apply for unemployment insurance, and you can't get under contract to something else because you're under contract to the board for 12 months. You're paid only for 10, but you're under contract for 12. You see how that works? Anyway, in the strike, which was very, very bitter, and we were on the picket lines for a couple of weeks, and it was really November, and it was really cold, and we were really grumpy. And there's one student that I had who shall remain nameless unless I get her permission, out of nowhere, appeared with a cup of hot chocolate and said, "Here, Mr. Kaplan, it's for you." And that little move was something that I'll always remember. And I was really touched by it. It was that the support from one person who didn't need to be there, who didn't need to make that little extra effort. And that's just another thing when you're teaching. How much effort does it take to go that little extra effort? She did as a student. So I think she was grade 10 at the time, and I was so impressed with that. And I so enjoyed the hot chocolate. I was so impressed with that. It meant a lot to me. And when I get back in touch with her, I'll see if she wants me to use her name or not. But if she's watching, she'll know who she is. That was such a wonderful move, such a wonderful gesture. And that's something I'll never forget. But that was a really, really tough time. And there's stories about that strike that I'll get into at a later date. There's some teacher issues and so on and so forth. Some teachers accepted the strike, some didn't. And it wasn't a happy time. And for those of you who think that we didn't come out of it on the back end of a terrible deal, which we did, that government, Mike Harris' government, froze our salaries for years, 6 or 7 years. If you can imagine, with the price of everything continuing to go up, and our salaries staying exactly the same for 6 or 7 years. No raise in pay, nothing. Okay, so when people argue with me, oh, you guys are paid a lot of money. No, we're not. No, we're not. I could have become a professional musician and played in jazz groups or symphony orchestras or rock bands or whatever I wanted to do. and I could have, and made 3 times the money that I made as a teacher. 3 or 4 times the money. Easily. Easily. Playing evenings and weekends and bar mitzvah circuits and wedding circuits and playing for drunk people. Now I've got stories about that. Um, but I didn't. I chose teaching. That was what I wanted to do, and that's what I did. Um, at a financial cost, yes, but I came out of it. It's something you can't buy. When you have students like Michelle Muir and you work with people like Mr. Slater and Mr. Tepper and some of the other students that I've had the pleasure of working with. You can't buy that. You can't buy that. That's one of the reasons we get into teaching. Well, some of us anyway, me anyway, and it's the love of being able to work with students and seeing the aha moment go on, the light go on, and you can't buy that in front of an audience. In fact, I hated performing. I mean, I performed for 7 years in the Toronto Symphony Orchestra and many other orchestras. I conducted orchestras. I played in jazz groups. I played drums for Oscar Peterson. I played piano for other vocalists. I did that, and I understand now why people get depressed when you're on the road, and all you do is performances and performances. You finish, people clap, they slap their upper limbs together, and you bow, and then when you leave the stage, 10 minutes later, the place is empty, and you're back where you started. It doesn't leave you with anything tangible. The comment about the gentleman going on stage in a wheelchair and performing, I said this a couple videos ago, and himself not being able to stand unassisted, yet him getting a standing ovation, um, is it's an experience that doesn't come along on a stage if you're a performer. Geez, I'm running along today. I'm sorry. Okay, one person I want to talk about, I left her for the end. Among the teachers that I've had to work with, I hope people don't click off. Maybe I'll save her for the beginning because people have a tendency to watch 10 minutes and then shut down, which is really silly because there's stuff at the end of the videos that are just as good as the stuff at the beginning. No, I'm going to save her for the next video. Um, and maybe I'll end it here because I've got so many more stories, and if I start now, we're now at the 28-minute mark. I'll run into about 45 minutes, and I don't want to do that. Yeah, that's enough for today. Leave comments, subscribe, send me comments, flap your upper appendages together, um, and let me know if you're still enjoying this, and I'll keep doing them. I've got so many more stories to go. I don't want to label them all into one. Otherwise, you'll have an opera-sized um, video to watch, and I won't even watch that with my ADHD. I'm not going to watch that either. Have a good day. Stay safe. Get vaccinated. And if you know someone who's an anti-vaxxer, you send them to me. I'll straighten them out. Straighten them out faster than you know what. Take care. Bye.